Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel. In this video, I'm going to be unboxing and assembling. This will probably be a series of videos to complete this. This is the Carisma GT24. It is a micro buggy 1/24 scale. And there are two different versions of the unassembled kit. There is the GT24B, which is the buggy, and the R, which is a rally style car. I decided to go with the buggy because this is very similar to the Mini Z buggies. It's a little bigger, but in the more or less same class. It does include a transmitter and a receiver. It needs 4 AA batteries for the transmitter, a charger for the LiPos, and 3.7 volt 500 milliamp LiPo rechargeable battery packs, which they sell separately. And so you can, the assembled kits will come with a battery. These kits do not. So bear that in mind if you decide to do the assembled kit. These are a little less expensive, but you got to put them together, and I always like a project, so I thought I would go with the unassembled kit. So let's start by opening this up and seeing what we get in the box. So right off the bat, wheels, tires. These look right about the same size as Mini Z tires. Might even be able to swap them. We'll see. We have our servo, and these little parts here and the screw are undoubtedly our servo saver. This is our receiver and or speed control. Here we have some bearings, differentials for front and rear, all the gears for said, drive shaft, more gears, plastic shock absorbers, and they have an aluminum shock absorber kit, which I may go into at some point. Here is our motor, and it is a 3-wire motor, so this is a brushless motor. And we've got several pinion gears to choose from. Bag F appears to be front suspension components and probably some rear suspension components as well. More suspension and diff cases, so this may be front and this is probably rear. We have a nice little pre-painted body with a sticker sheet. Here is our chassis and box for the gear. Everything is really well packaged and organized. It looks like all the different screws we need for each task are individually packaged with that item. So just like this guy here is our, looks like our diff cases and suspension. We have the bearings for those diffs, we have the steering knuckles, and we have individually packed screws. And some of these are specialty screws where you can see they're only threaded part way, and then there's a smooth pin. These are going to be for the suspension arms, so those will be like our king pins. So this is a nice little kit, the way it is all organized. The radio is nothing special, but it's not bad. We've got a variety of controls, and we've got some more switching up here. So there's a little more than just trim. It's pretty light, you know. It's a for what this kit costs. I mean, the fact that it comes with the transmitter and receiver is very nice. Everything we need is in the box with the exception of some batteries. And here we have our instruction manual and a few tools. And I have some specialty screwdrivers that are perfect for very small screws, but it is nice that they provide you with, you know, their version right off the bat, plus a little wrench for wheel nuts and other things. So if you didn't have a good screwdriver, this might get you through the build process. I definitely recommend getting a quality micro screwdriver set. It's definitely something you should have in your toolbox for your RC hobby. But if you're getting into this for the first time and you've never built one of these, it's really nice to have that. You know, and also this is a really nice little Christmas present or stocking stuffer, depending on how big your budget is. But this is definitely a nice little gift for someone who's, like, let's say you've got a son and you want to start getting him into this stuff. You know, you see that he's got the potential to go into a field like engineering or a trade like mechanic. You know, it could be for airplanes or cars or whatever down the road in his future. The trade schools seem to be a really good way for guys to go, because the colleges just seem so problematic for men these days. And you can make a lot of money and not come out, you know, in debt up to your ears. I mean, just as an example, one of my best buddies from high school went to a master mechanics program. Took him less than a year, and in no time he was making almost 6 figures. And and he can find a job like that anytime he wants one. He can go to any city, any state, and find a job, because he has a very valuable and marketable skills. And he's not just a wrench twister. You know, he went through a master mechanics program. He did everything from small engines up through diesel trucks, and with an emphasis on the electronics. And that gave him an incredibly valuable skill set for troubleshooting. And so many cars, the electronics are always problematic, and a lot of mechanics don't know how to deal with that. So this would be a great little, you know, project car for that young aspiring child. You've got everything you need, and it teaches them to follow directions. You can sit them down with a tablet or a computer and show them these videos. Let them walk through the process and guide them through. I'm going to cover anything that I feel is intricate or important to know, anything that's not included in the instructions. And you know, this would be a great project for a father and son to do together, or if your son's young enough to do this on his own, you know, even better. Or old enough, not young enough. So, like with a lot of kits, we begin with Diff Building. And so I think we've got a couple of different spur gears for our drive shaft to choose from. And then we go on to shock assembly, motor and servo saver, front suspension steering, and then diffs into cases. Looks like the suspensions go together as single units, where they are, yes, where they're like standalone. All the suspension is contained, built around and onto the diff case. And as I recall, this is only about $200. Might be less. I'll get an exact price. It'll be on the screen here in a second. So let's see, just to go over the radio a little bit. Of course, there's the power on LED indicator. Okay, they have ATV, maximum steering angle of servo or both sides left and right when model makes steering. Okay, so this switch or this pot adjusts the sensitivity of the steering, so you can make it turn really tight, or if it's too twitchy, you've got a lot of space to run, you can dial that back and make the steering have less influence. We have trims for steering and throttle. We have a couple of switches for reversing the servo and throttle direction, and depending on how the steering servo is set up, we may need to reverse the servo. And then there's a throttle limit switch, and it's this one here. We see numbers 1, 2, 3. It's a 3-position switch instead of a potentiometer like this little one for the steering. And this gives us 3 levels of speed. So if you're got a young kid again who you're kind of getting into this for the first time, and you're, say, running indoors, you can set him up with a slower maximum speed. He'll still have decent acceleration and whatnot, but you can kind of dial the car to the environment, which is nice, and dial it to the driver's skill level. So that covers the all the switches and such on the transmitter. Okay, and there was one other thing, that this button right here, SW1, this is basically the bind button. You use this to bind the receiver to the transmitter, and that's pretty much a one-time thing. So let's move forward. Okay, this is going to be stuff we're going to go over once it's built. More basically specs, other things I'll go over later. So we can start by, I'm going to put everything back in the box and begin with bag A. We're going to need bag B very shortly after that, so I'm going to go ahead and leave both of those out. Now, one thing they did not provide is any lubricants, and we are definitely going to need those. We're going to need some diff fluid. I don't know how well sealed these are going to be, so this may be something that we need to add more than once. I may just put grease in here, because if I go too thick with the fluid to keep it from potentially seeping out, the resistance will be too hard. It could end up damaging the gears. These are very small gears and they're plastic. And we don't have a normal crossed spider. The little planetary gears, or maybe I think the large ones are the planetary gears. Anyway, the small gears in the differential do not ride on a crossed pin or a single pin. They just have little nubs on the ends that they rotate on, so they could potentially come apart. So this needs to be done carefully. Check all the pieces to make sure, on the gears, to make sure there's no flashing from the molding process, that you don't need to file off or trim off with an X-Acto knife. Everything looks pretty clean though. And that should be pretty much it for the crazy stuff. Let's see. I think I'm just going to use some graphite grease. This is just black graphite grease that you would put in a gearbox. This particular one is by Hoodie. I've got them by Associated, TLR, a half dozen manufacturers. This is kind of a standard thing you get in a box. You can get this kind of grease at any hobby store. We're probably going to need some oil or shock fluid to do the shocks. We may also use grease in those as opposed to shock fluid, because they may not have the kind of seals. So it may just be a friction arrangement, but we'll cover that when we get there. So I'm going to start by cutting some of these things open and getting all the parts out. And since we are building two identical diffs, I'm just going to divide everything up between these two trays. You see what I mean about how everything is so nicely packaged and organized for you? It would be very difficult to make mistakes. You don't need to worry about taking a screw and holding it up against a legend or measuring it to make sure that you've got, you know, the right size screw, because these screws are very, very small. And it would be easy to misjudge one screw for another if they just gave you a big pack of stuff. So I'm gonna just pause for a moment here and find my special screwdriver. Okay, it was on my airplane assembly table. So this is what I'm referring to. I found this on Amazon. It was quite inexpensive, and it's got a variety of small precision screwdriver tips and a handful of Torx. And one of them is currently on here, and the handle just slides into the pack like this when that is hanging from one of these. It's a nice little kit, and I believe it was only around, I would say, $8 to $15. And this has been invaluable because having a good precision Phillips head screwdriver tip is incredibly important when you're working with these teeny screws, because you can strip them very easily, either by using something that's too small or something that's too big and won't even fit in it, so you don't get anywhere. But this is a good item to find for yourself. And just to check if I need the smaller bit on these. And no, this looks like it's perfect, so good. I'm going to try not to bang my head into the camera too often. I apologize if I do that every once in a while and the camera shakes a little bit. So they don't give us a lot of step-by-step here. So let's just kind of examine things. So that's our outer case, which is this piece right here. This is our inner piece that everything is going to kind of rotate within and around. And this is our other outer case that also has our pinion gear cut into it or molded into it. So this is going to basically fit right in there. And again, I'm not going to fill this whole thing with grease. This doesn't need any grease on its surfaces because it is it's not rotating against itself. So and we need a gear in from behind here. So one of these two gears, and let's just make sure that they are identical, and they are. So one of these comes in from behind, like that. And I'm not going to try to grease that now. I'm going to grease the small ones when I start getting this together. Actually, might not be a bad idea to go ahead and do it now. So we're going to drop that in there. And I'm going to be pretty sparing. So as you can see, I just covered all the teeth, but I'm not, excuse me, I'm not saturating it. Oh, wait a minute, that goes like this. Excuse me. Okay, so that has our gear turning. So you drop your gears in. Make sure they are positioned correctly, like that. So now if I were to turn this, we'll see that there's 2 of them going. There we go. Now all 3 of them are in motion. So I'm just holding the gear down here and letting it rotate under the tip of my finger, like so. As you can see, I'm just making sure that that grease gets all around. And you know, I really should have put a little bit of grease on the back side here. It's probably, no, I think that, no, I'm going to do it. I think what's going to go on here is that gear will be held off of the inside surface by this, but actually the grease seems to have already made its way down under there, so I think we're good. I'm just going to go ahead and plug that back in. Okay, everything is in place. On this side, I will go ahead and put a little bit back here, though. This is really almost empty, I think. I'm going to need to get a different tube out. I went ahead and pulled from the wrong tray. So there you go. We turn one counterclockwise, the other one turns the opposite direction. And then we'll slide that pin down here. It goes through. It doesn't. I thought it went through from one side. It's got to be put in. Separately. And this is probably just to make sure everything stays aligned. Yeah, it just goes in there a little ways. Okay. Let's take off this cap. There we go. Get the pin through that center hole. Having never built one of these before, I'm kind of getting the feel for how everything goes together. Next one will go together even easier. need to get this one to drop in on that pin. There we go. So, functioning diff action. So now it's time to put in the screws, and these we need to be careful with. They will strip incredibly easily because they are very small. And we're not sealing this differential, so we don't need to worry about super tightening these. We just want them to be down and snug. I've mentioned this in many videos, but I'm going to go ahead and do it again here. When you're working with plastic and small items like this in particular, I recommend the 2-finger method, which is holding the screwdriver between your thumb and forefinger at the fingertips and turning like that, so you have minimal traction and you're putting a minimal amount of effort. That helps keep you from over tightening and stripping things out. Because if you damage these parts, you're not getting them back together. You'd probably have to buy the whole car over again. They might have some spare parts available, but I don't know about that. So, and then kind of do the star pattern thing, which isn't very easy when you consider we've only got 3 screws. But again, just make sure that it's put together properly. So there we go. Very easy. 1 diff done. Do you find these videos to be helpful, useful to you? Then please help me keep this channel going by donating. Click the link up here and you can donate safely through PayPal on either a one-time or a monthly basis, your choice. Okay, the next one should be even easier. I'm going to go ahead and get a fresh tube of grease out. Here is some TLR grease. So I'm going to start by putting a little down here. Doesn't take much. I'm going to grease the gear itself a little bit. Just put a little drop in there and kind of smear it around with the tip of the tube. For being all plastic and extremely small, this is a nice diff assembly. Now, since I just put lube on all 3 of those gears, I don't need to put any on the teeth of this. It'll all get spread around together here in a moment when I start turning the drive. Just like that. So now a little bit of grease around here, and before I go any further, I need to get this pin in through that centerpiece. There we go. Now, that pin in there that you should be able to hopefully see in the camera here, if I get close enough there, you should be able to see the reflection of it. It needs to go into the tip here, and this slotted piece here needs to go into the gear. that so you kind of gotta fiddle with it a little bit and then give it a little pressure, and it will push right in. There we go. Nice. And now we screw the diff case closed just like the first one. Piece of cake. And there is our nice smooth diff action. Great. So, 2 diffs assembled. Let's go on to bag B. One of those C-clips is different than the other 2, so I'm going to keep it separate. Okay. Okay, so they have 15395, 15395, and then 15395/15396 over here. So I'm going to go ahead and, since these are the same number and we have 2 identical C-clips, I'm going to go ahead and put those in these 2 locations here. Needle nose pliers should make that snap on. There we go. Always make sure that the C-clip can rotate free and easy inside the groove. If it's not rotating, that means it's not properly seated and it might pop back off on you. Go, and again, spins nice and easy. 2 washers in front and the other 2 behind. And since we have 2 gears, let's see. Looks like that says 58 tooth, and this one is 59 tooth, And this would give more power but less speed. This one's going to give more speed, less power. I'm going to go ahead and go with the faster one first. So we need to... Okay, that's interesting. Does this have a flat side? No, it doesn't. This must be like a kind of like a slipper, because the gear itself rotates freely. And we have this piece that is slotted, and that's gonna, you know, slide onto this axle and not move. It's got some little teeth cut into it, and this one has some grooves where those teeth will mate up. And then we have a spring holding it in place. So this could potentially, you know, stutter and chop, chop, chop around, and without damaging anything. And then we need one washer first, then the spring, then the next washer, and then we need to pop our C-clip on. Oops, we got to be very careful about that. That's gonna really want to fly away on us. Okay, the C-clip is going to need to attach on this groove. Okay, and that means we have to really compress this spring with the washer while getting that C-clip in place, and that is going to be very difficult to do without having this all fly across the room and get lost. So this is the one thing that an inexperienced person or a young person might want to get some help from somebody, because that is going to be, even for an experienced person, you know, this is where you really need like a couple extra hands. Wow. You know what? I got an idea. I think that is not the best order to assemble this. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pop this C-clip off. I'm going to slide the big gear on. I'm going to slide on our locking assembly. And we still have that problem to a certain degree, but not as bad. It should be easier to compress now. Excuse me. Oh yeah, I need to put those two washers in place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to put the clip here and then compress this into place. Because see, right now it's over the edge, and it's actually got to slide back to about there to make room for the two washers. So that's going to make doing the compression of this spring a little easier. It's still going to be tough, but it almost compresses to nothing. I did one out of order there. One washer, one spring, one washer, and now I have to compress this and put the C-clip on. It's still going to be hard, but it should be a little bit easier. Damn it. This is tough. I don't think this is the best way to go. As far as a design, this is the one thing I've seen so far that I think is a potential problem, because this is going to be really hard to do. First off, as you're sliding that washer down there, it wants to drop into the groove. Then the C-clip, you know, again, is going to be really hard to get into place. Okay, I'm getting there. There we go. I got it. And that sucker is tough. So now you see there's some room here. Not having that little bit of extra spring compression, you've got to almost, let me try and get this up close to the camera. You can see right now this is as far forward as it can go. With this gear in place, it's going to be coming back. Now you see how that spring is completely compressed? That's almost how it's going to be when this is on. But that's what makes this little clicker slipper thing actually work. So now that I have all that stuff in, now I can compress this and put in my C-clip from this side. That makes it a lot easier than trying to have that spring be 100% compressed. Because now I can just push down on the gear from either side, which is a lot easier to do than trying to push down the washer and then get a C-clip in place. And there we go. So that is the assembly trick of the day, probably of the month. Wow. It took more time and more effort to do this than to do both differentials. So, best of luck, everybody. Okay, shock absorbers. Bag C. Let's set this aside. I'll start a small parts box for this car. Something very small. Bag C. Shock absorbers. I might as well get a small box out right now. I got a few extra of these, so this looks like the perfect size to put spare parts for this particular car. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel. If you click the bell icon, you'll receive notifications every time I launch a new video. Thank you for watching.